welcome to Sewing with Kristene's Tips and Tools. Today I'm going to do a quick little tutorial on how to sew accurate and consistent 1/4 inch seams. Well, actually I'm going to show you how to sew accurate and consistent and straight seams, and for many of you I know that's going to be a 1/4 inch seam is your biggest interest for quilting. However, some of the tools I will show you will help you to make 1/4 inch, 5/8 inch, 1/2 inch, whatever size seams that you need to make. But these tools can help you to make them straight and keep them accurate. Outside of the tools, the other thing that I would like to share with you is it takes lots of practice. I've been sewing for more years than what I want to admit on camera, but and that means that I have spent many hours in front of the sewing machine, and it took many years for me to be able to get accurate, straight, consistent seams. So lots and lots of practice. But that's the fun of sewing, right? You get to practice, and so the more time you spend in front of the sewing machine, the easier it will get for you to make those straight and accurate and consistent seams. But hopefully today you'll learn a few things about tools that are available to help you as well. So as I was saying, today I want to show you some of the tools that are available to help you sew straight and even seams. Today we're really talking about 1/4 inch seams, so I'm going to focus on those in particular today. One of the things that your sewing machine most likely has is what they call a quilting foot. Like my machine here has a foot that's called, I believe it's actually called a patchwork foot, maybe called a quilting foot. It may just be the regular foot that you normally sew with on your machine. You're going to need to look in the manual of your sewing machine and find out which of the feet are meant to be used to sew a 1/4 inch seam. In my case with this one, if I align my fabric up on the right side of the foot with the right side of the foot here, and I sew a straight line down the side of this fabric, it's going to be a 1/4 inch. For my sewing machine, it is a 1/4 inch from where the needle is here over to the right side of my foot. That is a 1/4 inch. So if I put my presser foot down and I do a good job of aligning my fabric up with the right edge of the foot here, and I sew straight, and I sew straight along the edge of the fabric, I will get a straight seam. The challenge comes in what I said of keeping the fabric straight. Oftentimes, particularly for beginning sewers, it's very easy to get your fabric off to this side a little bit, and you can see the minute I get my fabric off to the side a little bit, it's not lined up with the edge of the foot, and this seam width is going to be a lot bigger than a 1/4 inch. I can also lean towards the other side. If I start guiding my fabric in this way, off to the left a little bit, all of a sudden the edge of my foot is not going to be going along the edge of the fabric, and I'm going to have a problem here. So there's a couple of different tools that you can use. One is you can use masking tape or blue tape, and you can run a line of tape right down the side, right where your 1/4 inch seam would be, and you can run it right down here, and you can guide your fabric along that piece of tape to help you keep the fabric straight. I'm going to show you another tool that's available. It's a very inexpensive little tool. It's a ruler here, and this ruler has different measurements. Starts out with a 1/4 inch up here on the top. You can get it down to 1/8 inch, a 1/4 inch, but we're going to focus on 1/4 inches seams today. So when I put my needle down through the hole that is labeled 1/4 inch, and I put my presser foot down, what that is telling me is from where my needle is in the hole to the edge of this green ruler is 1/4 inch. Now, as I just told you, for my foot here, we know that that's the edge of my foot, and that's right where the ruler is right at the edge, right at the right edge of my presser foot. This tool comes with a neat little magnet here. It's a really strong magnet. And I can put that magnet up against the edge of the foot, the edge of the ruler. And now, if I feed my fabric through and I make sure that my fabric stays aligned against this magnet and all the way up into the presser foot, if I make sure that my fabric is aligned right here, I'm going to get a 1/4 inch seam. And the beauty of this magnet is the way in which it helps you guide your fabric in. When this little magnetic guide here helps me to guide my fabric where it needs to be to keep it at a 1/4 inch. You can see that when I start sewing here and I keep my fabric pushed up against here, it gives me something to align the fabric with before the actual foot. So it extends the line that I'm lining my fabric up with quite a bit. And I can move my magnet down here even. So I've got another close to 1 inch of space here to get my fabric straight before it goes under the needle and through the foot. So if I happen to be off over here a little bit, it's going to be very visible to me because I have a longer place. I can see that gap sooner than when it gets to the edge of the foot there. And it really does help me to guide my fabric in and through. And if I use this magnetic guide and sew, when I get done, I should have a 1/4 inch seam. So I'm just going to finish sewing through this, and then I'm going to take my fabric out, and I'm going to use a ruler and show you how close I am to a 1/4 inch. You can see right up here. Let me scooch this up so that you can see it. Here's my ruler right here, and you can see that I'm aligned here at 5 3/4. Right here where my thread is happens to be aligned on this ruler at 5 3/4, and the side is aligned at 6 inches here. So my seam is very clearly 3/4 inch. Let me quickly before we end here, I also want to point out again on this ruler, not only can it help me with a 1/4 inch seams, it could help me with a 5/8 inch seam. So let's say that I am going to be sewing some garments. This device can help me with a 5/8 inch seam. I can find the hole where my needle would go for 5/8 inch. I could put my needle through the 5/8 inch hole here, put my presser foot down just to get it clear. I can put my little magnetic piece of magnet here, and now I can sew a very straight 5/8 inch seam. And so this time it looks a little bit different, right, than it did before. I've got more room between where my needle is and where this magnetic device is. But see how it's going to help me guide my fabric right through there, and then all of a sudden I should have a 5/8 inch seam because I'm guiding my fabric along the edge of this magnet, which is 5/8 inch away from where my needle is going through the fabric. So let's take this one out. So if you're just beginning to sew or you're having some trouble with straight seams, I would highly recommend this tool or a similar tool to it. Here we go here. In this case, I've got my 3-inch line here on my actual seam, and the edge of the fabric is at 5/8 inch here. So I've got a really good 5/8 inch seam in this piece of fabric here as well. And look how straight my seam is because I was guiding it. My stitching line is very straight because I was guiding it along that magnetic edge. So I hope you find this helpful for you to be able to sew seams of accurate widths and also to be able to sew very straight seams. And if you practice a lot with a tool like this, over time you may not need the tool, but I'll tell you, as much as I've sewn, I always use a tool similar to this because it just makes it so much easier to make sure I have straight seams. So thank you for joining us today. So hopefully some of the tips and tools that I just showed you will be helpful for you to improve the accuracy of your seam allowances. I hope you learned a little bit from us today, and I hope that you'll join us again